Okay, so we are going to begin to prepare on learning how to turn the pattern that you drew, that you designed, and actually turn it into a weaving. So a couple things that you need. You need your graph paper with the patterns that you previously designed. You need some kind of paper to weave in. I have this little, what's going to be my weaving sketchbook. And this is just Bristol board that I'm going to use. Regular paper would be fine. You need an X-Acto knife. And you need something to write with, and then you're also going to need strips of paper to weave with, which I just grabbed some colored printer paper, and we'll talk about prepping that later. Okay, so a couple things to get us started. We're going to look at our patterns and decide which one you want to try and weave. I'm going to go with the first one that I actually did. So the next step for this is to kind of plan some things out. So on our graph paper, our lines, remembering our lines that are going vertically, those are representing our warp threads. So we're going to go ahead and actually number them. So I'm going to number, this would be number 1, which just turned out really giant, number 2, number 3, and so forth, putting a number on each one. Now my graph paper is pretty small. I'm just going to go up to 15 because I don't think I'm going to go the whole way across. Then we're going to do the same thing for our warps because that can be helpful. So go ahead and number those as well. Okay, so once you have those numbered, now we're going to work on actually preparing our weaving surface. So I have this sketchbook that I can actually take the pages out. So I'm going to go ahead and pull one of the spreads out of my sketchbook so it's a little bit easier to work with for my weaving process. Then what I'm going to do is I've decided I'm going to make 15 warp threads on my paper. And I'm gonna use my ruler to start to measure those out and see how that's gonna fit. So if I have 5 inches, I'm gonna do it in pencil first. And I also am gonna say I don't wanna go right up to the edges. So I'm gonna kind of make a little frame for myself, and this is really personal preference, not necessity. Okay, so that's where my weaving's gonna stop, and now I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna go ahead and for this one, I'm actually gonna switch to my pen so it's a little bit easier to see. I'm gonna do a mark every 1/4 inch. Okay, then I'm gonna measure the same thing out down below here so that I can make sure my lines are actually straight. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and connect my dots, drawing my lines in. Actually, no, I'm not going to draw them. I'm going to go straight to cutting them, which I'm just going to flip my paper over. You want to have some kind of surface underneath here. And one more thing, we're going to put our guard lines in. So I'm not going to go past this line, and I'm going to draw a little cut off down at my bottom so that we have a frame that we're cutting our lines within, because we don't want to cut the whole way through our paper. Okay, so I'm cutting within these pencil lines, lining up, making sure that it's nice and straight and that it's splitting open. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and do that to all of our lines. Okay, so now I have all of my slats cut out, and I'm actually going to go ahead, because it can make it a little bit easier, and I'm going to put numbers along the top. Next, we need to prepare the strips that we're actually going to weave with. So I would recommend you want to pick some kind of paper that you actually like. I'm not in love with this color, but it's kind of been laying around my studio, so I'm going to use it. It needs to be at least the width of the piece that you're weaving, which mine definitely is. And then you're going to cut the strips. So I'm going to fold mine in half so that I'm cutting my strips, 2 strips at the same time. You could do this on a paper cutter. You can measure this out if you want to. What I'm doing is actually using my graph paper as a tool to kind of help me measure my strips. There's no right or wrong in the width of your strips. It's just going to be kind of more detailed, more intricate the thinner your strips are, but it's not like a right or wrong hard and fast rule. You can utilize more than one color if you want to. I'm going to stick with one color for this, but feel free to experiment. I'm throwing those out because I messed up. I didn't cut a very straight line, which it doesn't have to be perfect, but I like mine to be pretty straight. All right, so now I have my strips. Put my X-Acto knife away, and I'm going to turn back to looking at my pattern and thinking about how I can understand how to weave my pattern. So I'm going to look at this very first row, and the first block is blank, which means that I'm looking at, I need to cut my edges for this to make sense. I need to cut this. It's going to make it weave a little bit better. Okay. So, I'm looking at mine. My first block is blank, okay? So that means we're gonna have the white paper show. So for my very first one, I'm going to go under. Then I look into block 2, and block 2 has the color. So I'm gonna have my color go over. Block 3, 4, and 5. So the next 3 are actually white. So that means I'm going to go under 3 of them, all at the same time. So I've gone under those 3. Now I see another colored one, so I'm going to go over and then under 3. So what I'm seeing is my pattern for this is over 1 and then under 3. That is the pattern for my first row. Over 1, under 3. So over 1 and under 3. Over 1 and then under. Okay? What you want to do then is go ahead and push that up to the top. Now, my paper is longer than it needs to be. I just leave it like that till the end, and then I will trim. So what you may want to do, depending on how good you are at keeping track of things, is check off. So I've just done that row. So I've made a little red mark so that I know I did that, and now I'm on row 2. So in mine, my row 2 actually starts with the color, and I'm looking and it starts with 3 color. So that means I'm gonna go over the first 3, and then it has 1 white. So what I'm seeing is this is now the opposite, in that I'm gonna go over 3. This guy doesn't want to come out from here. All right. There we go. So I'm going to go over 3 and under 1. And that's the whole pattern there. So over 3 and under 1. Over 3, under 1. Over 3, under 1. And so that would pop back up out at the edge. And I'm going to push that up. Now you'll find the closer together you have your strips, the kind of clunkier it is. It's a little bit more challenging to weave, but I think it looks more interesting, so that's why I made mine a little closer together. So that was my second row, and now I'm on to my third row, which is a repeat of the first. Okay, so you will start to see, as you see your pattern play out, you'll start to find some repeats. So this one was under the first one, so under row 1, over row 2, and then I'm going to go under 3 and over 1, under 3 and over 1, under 3, over 1, and then under 3. Now you can see part of the reason I like my strips to be a little bit longer is it helps them, because they're still kind of loose, so I'll glue them down at the end. So while they're loose, it helps it to make sure that they're at least not flying out of the paper. So what you should be able to see now on mine is, because I've created this first 3 rows that created my whole pattern, I now have that little cross pattern happening in my weaving. So this is how weavers come up with designs. So I'm going to cross that one off, but I'm still not fully back. My pattern changes through, it's basically 6 rows before I do a full repeat of my pattern. So now I'm looking at my next row, and this one is telling me I'm gonna start by going over 3, and then I'm gonna go under 1, and then over 3 and under 1. Over 3, under 1. Oh, you know what? I read that one wrong. I did that wrong. And the joy is, when you do it wrong, you just pull it out. I did not go under the first 3, which is what I'm supposed to do. So let me fix that. I'm supposed to go under all 3 of these, because my first 3 are white. Then go over 1. And then under 3. And and then over 1, under 3, over 1, under 3, and over 1. So then I'm going to tuck that back under there. All right, now we're rocking. All right. So I'm going to wiggle that one up. We don't all have to be really perfectly nice and tight aligned until the end, but I do like to kind of move it so that I can start to check my pattern. So again, I'm going to check that row off. And now this next one has me starting by going under the first 2. Check that off. And now this one is under 3. When I push these all nice and tightly into place, I should now once again see my pattern, which I do. So I have the crosses and then continue to have the cross, or it kind of looks like a plus sign that's slightly moved over. And so now the next 3 rows are going to be a repeat of this top, and we'll keep going back and forth until I have all of mine created. So this is a time where you could decide if you want to change colors, or if you're like me, I realize that I need some more strips before I can continue with my weaving. So, some things you're going to find is that the closer to the edge that you get, the harder it's going to be to weave, because you kind of have less and less wiggle room. So in my little test pieces like this, I normally don't even bother going all the way to the edge, because I'm kind of making them to understand how a pattern's going to look and just to experiment. So it's up to you if you really want to push yourself and go through this edge. If you're using paper that's as thin of strips of this, you can actually use a needle, and you can go ahead and tuck this through the end of your needle and pull that through, which can be helpful. And we'll look at that more in another video. Then to finish this up, what you're going to want to do is get a glue stick and just glue your little edges down. And then I take my X-Acto knife and just go right along the edge of my paper. Whoops, I just ripped my paper. My X-Acto knife is not sharp enough. So you should let your glue dry. That's what I did not do. So go ahead, glue your edges down. Let them firmly dry in place, and then either use your X-Acto knife or use scissors to come along and trim your edges, and then you're finished with your first weaving. And then since I am kind of working in a weaving sketchbook, I'm going to take my record in my book. The other thing that I think I would probably do, and I would recommend to you as well, so that you can remember it. So now that I have my actual woven piece, I'm also going to cut out the pattern that I drew, and I'm going to glue it on the other side so I have record of that. The other thing that you should look at, because this is always really interesting in weavings, especially more complex weavings, is what you have on the front is not going to be what you have on the back. So you actually have a different pattern showing up on the back of your weaving, which can be really cool. There have been times that I've done weavings and was really doing it with the intent for one pattern, but once I looked at it and looked at the back, I actually like how the back turned out more than the front. But that can be a fun thing to realize, that you're really creating two different textures within your weaving. So that is your first step in drawing a weaving pattern and then really translating that so that you're understanding how to actually weave it and turn it into something.